And yeah, good morning, Dr. Vijayaji. Dr. Vijayaji attended medical school in India. Later, she got her internal medicine training at Wayne State University in Detroit. She did fellowship in gastroenterology at UCSD. After the fellowship, became a faculty member for 7 years before leaving in 2002 to start her own practice. She's an integrative gastroenterologist with a special interest in autoimmune disease and inflammation. Uh, am I right, Dr. G? You want to introduce
Yes.
yourself?
Yes, I am in private practice, and yes, I practice both the integrated medicine and gastroenterology. So I am very interested in wellness more than just disease management.
Uh-huh.
And so today, what I'd be, go ahead.
Yeah, welcome to India Home, and you'll get to see our seniors, enthusiastic seniors. They want to learn more about these. We have every week these series health lectures, and we are welcoming you. It's all yours now.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. I'm not sure, the audience I'm speaking to, but I'm assuming all of you are very curious about health and various aspects about it. Dr. Rao mentioned a little bit about the previous speakers and the topics you had covered. And so today what I'm choosing more is actually, I guess I am not going to offer you recipes, advice necessarily on slide about what to eat, what to drink, what not to eat, what not to drink, how to be healthy and happy is definitely an important goal. And you have had many people come to you to speak about all of these things. Today's approach is actually to maybe perk your curiosity, to give you the opportunity to actually think outside the box, and actually, in so doing, empower you. That is my primary aim in my practice. That is how I practice medicine. I'm not interested in just disease management. I'm interested in empowering the patient to wellness. And the data I'm going to present here are going to be not so much charts of data, but concepts that are really key to understanding a few things. So at the end of this presentation, I hope you will have some awareness of what governs disease and health in the physical body, and particularly what are the real causative factors for why you would develop a physical condition, how emotions are an integral, often overlooked part of why we get sick, and how they can begin to help, how you can begin to help yourself, in addition to the medications and diets and lifestyle management that you have already started to put in place. These, I hope that today's lecture will give you some understanding of maybe how the human body works and what I can do for myself in addition to what my doctor and other healthcare practitioners do for me. So it's really, I'm going to try and keep it down to about 30 minutes so we have time for questions, and we'll go from there. So I guess these are big questions. I don't expect to cover everything to do with what is disease, how is it caused, and how is it treated. But I started with this bullet point just to set the background for the kind of questions that I have asked as I have practiced integrative medicine, because the standard medical approach has to be reviewed so that you understand the various aspects of how and where your doctor is coming from. So you can maybe then start to ask what are the kind of questions people who practice in the space that I do ask. So for instance, if you look at the actual epistemology, which is basically a fancy word of saying what are the actual methods of knowledge in medicine, how do we follow and acquire knowledge within medicine, we have several schools of thought, and summarized in this slide are the commonest schools of thought that are in use today. For instance, when you look at the traditional method, which this includes Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, and most ancient treatment methods, which are all basically, in a sense, traditional systems that have developed as a result of basic theories on how the body functions. And the essence is, this is how it's always been done. We have a standard set of approaches that we use, and they are very, very useful when you're dealing with symptomatic treatments. So, you have this particular condition. If you have a vata dosha or you have a pitta dosha, then this is what you take. This is how you treat such a person. So all of this, traditional methodology is basically well tried and true over decades, if not centuries, and there is a good time and track record of anticipation of results, which is definitely useful when we're treating certain symptoms. But the problem and the huge disadvantage it has is that it's very difficult to apply for people who are not within the system. So if you come to me with a list of Chinese herbs that I have to then integrate into my treatment, it's very difficult because the way a Western trained practitioner or somebody who has not been trained in Chinese medicine can interpret the system is very limited. So that's the traditional thing versus something empirical where, there is knowledge that has also been there for a long time and it comes with practice. What falls in this space is generally homeopathy, where there is a tendency to personalize care. Each person is given a remedy based on their specific evaluation by their homeopathic practitioner, for instance. And the main reason that this is, as has not gained as much populace within the Western world or within Western physician training is the fact that there is actually very little clear treatment guidelines. It's a very empirical method that is validated as a result of the fact that the practitioner has had use, and therefore they are aware based on their practice how to actually use this medication. Now we enter into the rational mode of thinking, which is basically where most Western medicine falls. So just about every medication that you've used falls into this school of thinking, where the advantage is it is objective, it's very dispassionate, it's scientific, reproducible, and the knowledge is transmissible. They tend to disregard every other approach when they see the patient. And most of your doctors, I'm sure, and if you are physicians yourself, you are well aware of this. Yeah, believe heavily in the fact that scientific proof does not exist with other forms of practice. Therefore, this is right because I have proven all other ways that it's not. And therefore, there is actually well-established mainstream sharing methodology, be it peer-reviewed articles or in publications in scientific journals and discussion with colleagues that allows for Western medicine to have a rational approach to different diseases. The biggest disadvantage is that in so practicing Western medicine, we often disregard every other approach. Now, you cannot rule out the role of intuition, which is actually a form of knowledge that is much, much more than any one of these. And it is a part of each one of these as well, where you actually start to grasp the whole patient and the whole picture. And the essence of it is not determined necessarily in the fact that I can prove it, but you know it because you have actually started to spend enough time and have acquired the wisdom that comes with the knowledge of practice. And that is, where you start to begin to treat the patient as a whole. And finally, the most ideal situation would be a synthetic approach, which uses all the above four approaches and uses all the best elements and all the ways of knowing in treatment. And this approach obviously requires reflection, some level of intellectual flexibility, where I'm willing to entertain other options, something that we don't see in Western medicine. And it is actually, in a sense, right, because I have actually intuited, I have also rationally evaluated, I've also empirically observed when I've tested, and then I've established its relationship to tradition. So bottom line is that the best use is actually in all cases. So the point I'm trying to make here is that you want, at the end of the day, as a practitioner, to use something that uses the best of all worlds. And my current practice, which is based on the theory of endobiogeny, is actually synthetic in its use. So I use all available forms of treatment, be it Western, be it Eastern, be it any other. So if you going further into again drawing a comparison, you have to understand that to a large extent, medicine evolved initially in the early 20th century through a process of naive reductionism. We started to focus exclusively on cell biology. A lot of the treatments that most of you are even still taking today are actually um, drugs that were developed to target a single intracellular target, whatever that may be, whether it's an anti-inflammatory like aspirin or Advil, or an aromatase inhibitor that specifically limits one enzyme in the cell that is often used in breast cancer, or diuretics or beta agonists, which are a class of medications that are often used for hypertension or heart disease. So these are all, or for that matter, any replacement therapies for deficient physiological products like hormones and therapies of all kinds. So this was the approach from the 20th century, where people were using medications essentially to substitute for any deficient production, or to try and stop or to try and stimulate within the cell at the cellular level certain mechanisms. By the mid 20th century, we started to evolve into a more complex reductionistic approach, where now, through the explosion of molecular biology and the intense study and the role of DNA, we started to move further and further into the lowest level of activity. In other words, we're going further into the cell, and that resulted in a whole explosion of new fields that I don't expect any of you may have heard of, but clearly they arise from such studies. So we're now into transcriptomics, proteomics, metabolomics. I mean, these names get fancier by the day. And in effect, what we're doing is going deeper and deeper into the cell. No longer are we just inhibiting one product within the cell. We're actually studying the genetics of how it's made, how it's moved, and then we're developing molecules now that are actually stopping that and or interfering with cellular function at a very microscopic level. So all of this has required further analysis of DNA and genetic mechanisms of what we call the transcription or production of proteins within the cell. All of that results in a gene-centered approach, in short, to disease management. The problem is it has failed to work as expected. This is naturally because of what I'm going to present going forward. But in general, the point is that Western medicine has become more and more specialized, and the newer therapies that are emerging have very, very selective targets within the cell. And instead of going the other way, where they start to see the patient more as a whole and look at the person as an integral part of where the disease is happening, we are starting to become more and more microscopic. However, the data that is emerging on treatments is not supporting this kind of an approach, largely because rather than solving problems, we are actually creating more, and we're realizing that there are more patients we are unable to serve successfully. Although we have had rapid advances in management of, let's say, cancers for that matter, because of the genetics, we have now identified, I think, several, if not tens, at least hundreds of genes in different diseases that overlap between diseases. And even if you take the same two patients with the same, let's say, cancer, like breast cancer, with the same genetics and use the same drug, we rarely get the same results. So there is becoming less and less, uniformity, and our attempt to standardize protocols, use algorithms to actually go through a decision tree and choose treatment for patients is not serving everybody, as it is expected that it wouldn't, largely because we are much more than just our cells. So that's what I hope to present in the ongoing slides. So when you start to look at how can I help the patient, which is kind of what has been my personal experience in my own journey, you stumble upon the fact that you may have to integrate different methodologies and actually see the patient as much more complex than one system that I'm going to fix with the cell, with the product, or treatment of the disease itself. So when you shift the emphasis to treatment of the patient rather than just the disease, you start to fall into the realm of integrative medicine. And here I introduce another word where I'm comparing integrative versus integrating medicine, with both of which have subtle differences. So when you look at integrative medicine, what we're trying to do is basically use and layer over current approaches, additional therapies particularly where we don't have satisfactory pharmacological therapies or surgical interventions. And in general, it includes 3 different approaches that most integrative practitioners take. So you will see, for instance, in the realm of integrative medicine, comparators between alternative or complementary approaches versus standard medicine in terms of quality of life and patient well-being. So this is a very common, both the word alternative medicine, complementary medicine has been used to describe most of the traditional therapies that are out there, whether it's Chinese medicine or Ayurveda or homeopathy. Any of these approaches are now starting to get incorporated. And this has to do with the fact that small studies and larger studies now are being shown to have benefit, that using some of these treatments is improving our quality of life and patient well-being. And in addition, another favorite is to investigate the mind-body approaches such as meditation or energy therapies. And these are generally mechanisms that these are therapies that we know work, but we don't understand how. So they lack clear mechanisms of action, but they do have proven clinical results. And most importantly, in the whole concept of integrative medicine, the aim is not to encroach upon the dominion of standard clinical medicine. Most people who practice integrative medicine, most of the so-called experts in the field of integrative medicine, they are using it as a supplemental approach, but not to rock the boat of standard clinical medicine. So a lot of integrative medicine focuses on how to supplement and how to layer over the current approaches rather than actually propose anything significantly newer or different. And they do focus on diet and nutritional supplementation. So for instance, a standard integrative practice would be to use probiotics or to use fish oil or to use red yeast rice instead of a statin, or to teach you how to meditate or the benefits of a mind-body approach. This is very different from integrating medicine, where you actually use a synthetic approach to actually understand the patient, and you're starting to step outside the boundaries of standard clinical medicine. So endobiogeny is the word here that I wanted to talk a little bit about. I'll just spend a minute or two. This, to go into details on how endobiogeny works is beyond the scope of this talk. And it's actually very, very difficult even for doctors to understand, but I will try and give it a go here because it's a very right-brained approach. In endobiogeny, we're using a systems-based approach, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what a systems-based approach looks like. So what we are using is a systems-based approach to medicine, and we are trying to integrate and interrelate different physiological phenomena. Physiology is basically the basic functioning of your cell and of you, how your body works in health and how it works in disease. And we're using that as well as interrelated physiological phenomena to explain what we call a complex and dynamic system, such as a human being. Because you as a human are such a complex and dynamic system. How did you come into existence? How did you develop? And what happened, as you progress from infancy to adulthood? How do you adapt to various demands within your body? And how does your body manage itself against internal and external aggression? We're very, very interested in all of these factors. And by doing this, we develop a very good understanding of the patient. And at this point, the physician is free to use whatever therapy he or she desires based on the precise understanding of the patient. So we end up actually studying the physiology of the patient, both from a endocrine, which we call a humoral, and nervous system, which is a neurohumoral form of regulation. And then what we end up doing is using whatever treatment. So we are truly synthetic in that at sometimes I may use Western medication, at sometimes I may use herbs, at sometimes I may use mind-body techniques, or I may use various combinations of all of the above based on your presentation to design a treatment plan that is unique to you rather than, fit you into an algorithm and say, what disease do you have? So the questions we ask are somewhat different. And as I explained, I will try to go over a systems-based approach, which will maybe highlight that for you in the next page. We believe in endobiogeny that every disorder, be it physiological, physical, mental, or emotional, directly or indirectly implicates a certain level of endocrine dysfunction. And all of this is scientifically proven. There is data based on decades of research looking at the form of the physiology of the body. And so it is well documented and scientific, but at the same time synthetic, which is what true integrating medicine should be versus the current concept of integrative medicine. So in order for this, you have to understand a little bit about systems theory. I don't know how many of you have heard of Vijaya Prata, but I would highly encourage you to read some of his books. The Tao of Physics is a very big one. And then the Turning Point is the next one that he's written. And what we do in systems theory is very similar to the difference between the classic Newtonian physics and quantum physics, where initially in Newtonian physics, everything was a cause was believed to have an effect, and basically everything was felt to be interconnected in a linear manner. In other words, there is gene X that then codes for protein Y that then causes disease Z. Therefore, gene X is responsible for disease Z. This is kind of the model that, the genetic approach that modern medicine has tried to take, has taken us to places. So if you're hearing about a gene for pancreatic cancer or a gene for breast cancer or a gene for Parkinson's, or potential gene for Alzheimer's and the need for genetic therapy, they are all based on a linear interrelative pattern, which is very different from the way the quantum physics model works or a systems theory work. But within the systems theory, what we're really looking at in an open system model is we're looking at the environment. We're interested in the interrelatedness and interdependence of all phenomena. We don't ignore anything happening. We look at everything, we give it equal weight. And in this framework, an integrated whole whose properties cannot be reduced to those of its part is called a system, which means that if I look at you as a human being and you are a series of systems that work together, you are much more than all the systems put together. So if you look at myself, putting my heart, my lungs, my kidneys, my skin, and my gut together in another person would not create me. I, as the whole, my properties cannot be reduced to those of my parts. I am larger than the whole. So the basic open system model as shown in this means that you have to take into factor the environment, all the elements that are outside the system that have the potential to affect all or part of the system. You also need to recognize that there are resources that are taken or received from this environment, and that the open system model means that the whole or this particular system within the body, as a result of taking these resources, we have, through process of conversion or transformation, usage of resources within the system that generates an output. And then this output feeds back into the system. So in other words, it's a dynamic approach where I'm looking at where I am, who I am, and how I interrelate with my environment to understand why disease is being caused in me. So this is the systems theory on which endobiogeny is based. And here I'm going to talk a little bit about what science, people who have pioneered some of these approaches, although not necessarily endobiogeny, certain concepts that I hope you will follow. First of all, I wanted to highlight this particular book, The Biology of Belief. I don't know how many of you have ever read it or heard of the author. Bruce Lipton is a cell biologist who came up, and this book was published, I want to say, in 2009, 2007, 2008, in that period, where there was an explosion in the fact that we are looking at the whole thing backwards. So for instance, as a cell biologist, his basic contribution was that it was really the relationship between the cell and its environment that was controlled by the cell membrane that regulated function, not the genes. And as he says in his book, you are actually not just yourself, you're a bustling community of more than 50 trillion cells that all work together. And I often tell my patients, the analogy is very similar to when you go listen to a symphony. If you've been to a symphony, you see a couple of hundred musicians on the stage, and they all play in perfect harmony. And the reason they play in perfect harmony is because they are all reading the same piece of music. And if each of them had a different music sheet and one was playing one sonata and the other one was playing another one, then it would not sound like a symphony at all. But they all read the same music, and they all chime in when they have to, and then they go quiet when they have to, allowing the other to play. This is exactly what your body is doing. So in this particular slide, what you see is a picture of the cell with its components, typical human cell, with its individual components, which we call organelles. These little organelles, this is, for instance, the endoplasmic reticulum. This is the nucleus of the cell. There are actually, that was the Golgi body. This is the endoplasmic reticulum. These are all individual components that we study when we start studying cell biology as individual little organelles or mini organs within the cell. And the likeliness of this individual cell is very similar to the human body, where each of these organelles are like your own organ systems. For instance, the nucleus is very similar to the brain. The endoplasmic reticulum, where the proteins are synthesized, is very similar to the liver. The Golgi body, where there is actually final processing of these proteins, is another part of the body. And the mitochondria, which you see here, which are the areas where the energy is produced, are very similar to the lungs. So the parallels between the fact that each cell is a system which is closed to itself, but then it lives in a community of several cells that then form an organ, and each organ then within the person is part of a system, a whole system of you being the human being, was a concept that we started to, integrate into holistic medicine. And in this book, what he talks a lot about is that actually, for centuries, everybody believed that the genes which are stored in the nucleus were the center of where everything happened, that the genes determined who you were going to become. And so genetics was part of your destiny. But as he was able to show, and after him, several other people were able to also demonstrate this phenomenon, we realized that genes are actually downstream to the determinants. In other words, what really creates the intelligence of this particular cell system and how the cell functions is not necessarily what is stored in the nucleus, but the functioning of the cell membrane. The actual membrane of the cell, which is the outer covering of the cell, has the intelligence through its various channels and proteins that are within it that allow or not allow things inside to actually interpret its environment or what it's bathed in. And therefore, that allows this cell to have the intelligence to tell itself what genes have to be transcribed. So that's what I've written here before. The cell with its organelles or mini organs at the microscopic level is similar to the body with its multiple organ systems that work together. The cell membrane with its receptor proteins is the manager of this at the microscopic level, while at the macroscopic level, the global system, which is your entire body's functioning, is like a cell membrane that manages the genes and not vice versa. So it's not like you are a victim to the genes you carry. It is that you, through your perception of your environment, actually tell your genes what to make and what not to make. The control level is not in the nucleus or the genetics. The control is in the relationship to the environment. This has been well proven because I don't know if you recall when the Human Genome Project was launched, I think in the late 1990s, there was a lot of anticipation and a race to the finish line of who can clone the human genome first. And that was a big item. There was a lot of hoopla. There was a lot of excitement that we have basically now, what's the word for it, figured out a way to solve all problems related to human disease. And in the scientific community, there was all this excitement. But all that big pizzazz died down very, very quickly when we finished transcribing the genetic code. And today we're not that much wiser than we were before we knew it. And that's when people started to realize that it was never the genes, it is the relationship between the cell and its environment, or epigenetics, which was the new field that was then born, where we had to understand better the relationship between the environment and the genes rather than just the genes itself. So today, we well recognize the epigenetic model of disease, where we never ever attribute anything just to the genes, but to actually the relationship between the environment and the individual. So epigenetics has continued to evolve, and it determines that there are internal and external determinants on the expression of genes. So this particular slide, I'm not sure whether you can read it. So I am going to read it out for you just because it makes a very important point. So if you had to summarize epigenetics, it really is, we are not controlled by genes like computer programs are controlled by code. This is a fallacy propagated by Darwinian-based scienticism for almost 2 centuries. Genes are a biological tendency for expression. In other words, genes give you the potential for expression, but not the probability for disease. Changing our state of consciousness can influence or even change completely the tendency for expression. When we do this, our code can actually be rewritten and a different manifestation can be expressed. So, in summary, we are not the code, we are writers of the code. And this is the theory behind which I'm sure a lot of your other speakers were talking to you about, whether you eat a certain way or cook a certain way, or you exercise this much, or you spend time meditating, or you de stress. It definitely affects your longevity, your health, your well-being, how your physical body functions. That's the classic implication of epigenetics, which is that, you may have been born into a family where everybody developed diabetes at the age of 50, but it doesn't mean you need to. You will if you follow the same choices they made. But if you choose differently, as simple as diet and lifestyle, you might delay or even stop the development of a chronic illness like diabetes by your choices if you started earlier. So that is a classic application of epigenetics. So going on to how somebody who uses the system theory would actually look at disease, this is a basic summary slide where I'm looking at some of the components I already talked to you about. So on your left is the various components within the cell. So here is a cell, and here is the nucleus of the cell, and within the nucleus is the chromosome, and within the chromosome is the actual DNA, which is called your blueprint or fingerprint, which connects the genetic code, which has the genetic code that defines, the color of your hair, the color of your eyes, what height you're going to be, and so on. Different components of your phenotype or your physical manifestations. So when you actually look at how we approach a patient in a system model of disease, we start to separate from how the disease develops. This is where medicine falls. Most of your standard medical literature as well as treatments fall in this realm, where there is interest in what is happening at the nucleus, what is happening at the level of the DNA, what's happening at the level of the genes. This will tell you how the disease develops. But when you look at it holistically, this is not enough for the average integrating medicine practitioner. We are also interested in why the disease develops in this individual at this time. In other words, why do you have this disease? Why did it happen at this time? Is a bigger question. And for that, we need to have a global systems medicine model, where if this is your system, where you have different organ systems working together, each one affects the function of other, you have an input into this system where something happens in the environment around you that then creates within the body or the organ systems a response. And that response leads to the release of some information that can then result in cellular transformation and the transcription or the genetic expression of certain factors that then can cause the disease. So this is what we look at, and this is what we evaluate in endobiology for every patient. So I'm not really just interested in what disease you have. I'm interested in why you have the disease, how you developed it, how also, therefore, can you reverse it? That's the goal that I wanted to focus on. So this is just basically showing you the interrelatedness of it all. That when we take both the cell, we take all the organ systems, the different layers of the cellular of your development, which then generates your body, and we look at all internal and external factors that interfere through the environment with the functioning of you as a whole, you as a bunch of organ systems, and you at the cellular level. The other concept I just wanted to mention here is that all of this kind of connectedness or interconnectedness requires a manager. There has to be something within your body that actually regulates the functioning of all of this. And in endobiology, as I alluded to earlier, we use the hormonal system as the actual manager of the terrain. We're interested in what is happening at the hormone level, different hormones, and we study hormonal activity, not just levels in the blood, but we study between how hormone levels are working within the cell and how different hormone systems are talking to each other. And if you look at what regulates hormonal activity, this is basically a slide alluding to, again, work from a very seminary paper, as well as a Nobel Prize I think, shortlist scientist. Her name is Candace Pert. And this is a book that I would also suggest very much that you consider reading. It's called Molecules of Emotion. And she talks of it as the science behind mind-body medicine and alludes to the power of emotions. So to quote her, what she realized in her lab is that the molecules of emotion, in other words, feeling or relating to the environment, which we do all the time, is through emotion. And when you actually feel an emotion within your body, what happens is there is the release of certain molecules, which are a kind of neuropeptide, which is basically a protein that will affect every body, every cell in your body. The chemistry and electricity of every cell in your body and mind is affected through these molecules. And this is how you experience at the cellular level whatever the emotion is that was caused by the environment around you, by your interaction with the environment around you. So feelings literally alter the electrical frequencies that are generated by our bodies, producing a non-verbal communication. She was able to show this very eloquently in her research. And she said as well that the prefrontal cortex, which is actually the only part of it, our body, that actually is different from other animals. The prefrontal cortex is our ability to, that's what gives us our sense of self. That's what gives us our sense of identity. That's the one that actually, makes us who we are as far as our ability to be rational, thinking, and analyzing beings. She says that the prefrontal cortex is responsible for complex evaluative decisions. This part of the brain is loaded with opioid receptors. So structurally, our most sophisticated reasoning is linked to bliss. So she shows very eloquently in this particular article that some of these neuropeptides that are released as a result of our experience are opioids, in what they call endogenous opioids. They belong to a class of chemicals that are very similar to morphine and to other medications that we use that for pain treatment. So these are basically now known as endorphins, these endogenous opioids. So her research is on endorphin molecules. And she realized that these endorphin receptors are most prominent within the prefrontal cortex. And therefore, a lot of what we do and how we process our environment and use it to learn is basically, in effect, related to our desire for bliss, which is basically what we are all here for. So you start to connect or create a link between how we experience the environment and what drives us to do things one way or the other. Most of us are making choices, unconsciously, albeit, or semi-consciously, in order to experience more of this bliss. So she does say, as our feelings change, this mixture of peptides that travels throughout your body and your brain also changes, and they are literally changing the chemistry of every cell of your body. So she starts to connect these neuropeptides to the emotions, and this work was very seminal to what I'm going to say next, which is that emotions actually do rule. So emotions are electrochemical signals that affect the chemistry and the electricity within every cell in the body. So human beings are like tuning forks, and they're in constant vibration, broadcasting and receiving information from the energy within. So how you perceive your environment, what and how you experience life has a lot to do with how your body and your cells, the intelligence that bathes your body and your cells. It is like the sheet of music I talked about that every musician on stage in the symphony reads. Each of your cell is being bathed with the intelligence that is generated as a result of your perception of the environment. And the hormones are just there to transfer. So peptides such as hormones of the pituitary and peptide receptors, they help modulate the expression of these emotions. In other words, you experience something and your experience defines the language of the hormone activity, which is then transmitted to your cells. And your cells are then functioning in a certain manner based on whether your experience is positive or negative. And why is this important? This is important because it actually starts to show you how you can create or uncreate disease. So to a large extent, this work, and what I have on the left-hand side here is the picture of the pituitary, the hypothalamo-pituitary axis, which is really the maternal and the paternal influences on our body. through this release of different hormones, which are the area of study that we have in endobiogeny. We work on all of this in endobiogeny. So in effect, what you have to realize is that my emotions create my pain. So behind every disease, and this is where it's going to be difficult for you to grasp, and I do not have the time to go into it in great detail, but I wanted to at least tickle your imagination here to understand that the real you is not your physical body, although almost all treatments are geared towards your physical body. The real you is the soul behind you. This is the part of your body that this is actually the real you that has and is the seat of your emotions, your passions, your desires, your aspirations, your intentions, your longings, your memories, and your personality, which is unique to you, and your choices as determined by the fact that you have free will. All of this you experiences life through the two appendages, which is your physical body and your spirit body. This is what you use when you go to sleep at night. This is what you use during the day when you're awake. The brain in the physical body is a mere tool to help regulate the functioning of the physical body, but it is not where you store your memories. Memories are actually stored in your mind and in the soul. This is why people who can have a piece of their brain removed can still remember events, because that's not where things are stored at all. Things are stored in these levels. Why is this important? The health of your physical body requires for you to be connected to your soul, because it is your soul that feeds the energy. This is one of the reasons why most children are born healthy and most diseases evolve as we get older. Because as we get older and become more and more mind-centered and intellect-centered, we end up actually disconnecting from the seat of our real self. The language of the soul is emotions, passions, and desires. And when you allow these to flow through you, that's when your body stays healthy. So behind every disease is suppressed emotion. Physical pain occurs because of my denial of emotional pain. Most of us are not aware of this. And we may be aware in some ways because now there is enough evidence to say there is stress and you have to mitigate stress, and stress makes the disease worse. But few people go the extra mile to tell you actually that your stress causes disease. Therefore, uncausing disease, which is a corollary, could also be possible if I changed myself. And therefore, I put forth for you that physical pain occurs because you deny emotional pain. And when you suppress emotion, which is supposed to flow through your soul, you are creating little energy pockets that stay stuck in your soul that then interfere with the energy flow into your bodies. And actually, over a period of time, that is what evolves into generating disease. So these suppressed emotions in turn alter our perception of our environment and can cause disease through alteration in the body and cellular physiology through their effects on the hormone systems that I have discussed for you so far. This is actually the true cause of all disease. Any other approach we take in treatment only works on effects and thus is only of temporary benefit. So this is something for you to think about. And so when I put it all together, here is you. You are both sensing and sending out signals into the world, and the external environment in which you are, which you experience through every cell in your body, but especially heightened through your senses, the five special senses of sight, touch, sound, taste, smell. All of these generate emotions within you. And that interaction can result in a series of different emotions. And I've just highlighted some of the more common ones. And when you actually experience them and there is this feeling, whether you allow these feelings to flow or not, creates, as you get older, certain choices that you make with respect to expression of these as you get older, that then creates within you a loss of emotional amplitude. Most adults are far less capable of experiencing emotions than their childhood counterparts. If you compare a young child to the average grandparent, the child is much, much more able, as we all were at the beginning of life, to experience the peaks and the valleys of their emotional response, which has become greatly dampened as we get towards our older years. So as your age in years increases, it appears that your emotional bandwidth starts to shrink. And this shrinking is associated with an increasing intellect. So we become more heavily invested in our intellect, less heavily invested in our actual experiencing things, which therefore results in us developing eventually a state of numbness. And this state of numbness to varying degrees is what creates most disease. So we sacrifice health and vitality as a result of this. And unfortunately, waiting for us Fortunately, rather, waiting for us on the other side is the state of union with the divine, which is bliss. But you will have to break down this numbness and go back further into more of your the emotional real you, in order to be able to experience this bliss. So I want to conclude by saying there is nothing new in the tendency to take obvious things for granted and to postpone logical thought. For many centuries, we were satisfied to accept life itself without questioning and without inquiring as to its beginnings, variations, and potentialities. Now we have some desire for understanding how life began, of its continuation and limitations. And I'm hoping I was able to stimulate within you at least some questions of what can I do in this scenario, and how can this information help me? Thank you for your time.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please, go right ahead.
You have given an excellent explanation of the latest development in the field of cell biology and medicine, and also spirituality and psychological world. But this is from a doctor's point of view. It is very helpful if it is a class of the MDs or some postgraduate students, but give some practical suggestion from the point of view of a common man. Now, I'm a
Yes.
highly educated person, but as a common person and being a senior citizen, I have certain needs and certain limitations. I cannot go and study a cell biology at my age to the library and start studying it. How will your suggestion help a common person to lead a better life? Under the restrictions that we have at present, we go to a doctor and you talk to him about, say, Trifla, Ayurvedic medicine. Say, I don't know what is that. You go to an Ayurvedic person, doctor, and you tell them that, oh, I took your herb and this is what happened. I fainted in the bathroom. So what should I do? Should I stop? Should I stop my allopathic medicine? He says, I don't know. How do you synthesize both? It is very, very difficult for a practical person to regulate your own life. Do I go the allopathic way? Do I go the Ayurvedic way? What should we do? Give a practical suggestion for a common person. Thank you very much.
Yes, you ask a very excellent question. And, I understand that a lot of things that I said are difficult even for the average medical graduate to comprehend, but
Yeah,
I
that's
struggled with
exactly what it is.
I struggled with how can I even explain my position to you without going into some of the background. So I had to go through this background so you understand
Yeah, thank
the
you very much.
connectionness
I
of it.
appreciate. I
Now,
appreciate. But
the
what can I
practical
do?
aspects of what you're saying. Now for the practical aspects, the first point I wanted to make for you is that regardless of what treatment you choose, treatment of the physical body is never enough. You are going to have to understand why you got a disease. And for that, there is no doctor who can tell you that. For that, you have to become introspective, reflective, and willing to understand one basic concept, that pain, we live in a universe of love. I think Albert Einstein said it best when he said one of the first things you have to decide for yourself is, do you live in a universe that is friendly or unfriendly? Now, your approach to life will tell you what you believe. That is like the first decision point that one has to come to. And when we understand that if you have any faith in God, if you believe in a loving universe, then you believe in a loving creator, you will actually then automatically start to understand that if I am in pain in this moment, be it that I'm in pain related to a headache, or I am in pain because my knees don't move, or I am in pain because I have a disease that is limiting my mobility, that is a feedback mechanism. The point I wanted to get across from a practical standpoint is your body is your best friend. And your body being your best friend, every message coming from your body is full of information for you. Now, when you were asking specifics about what do I do if the doctor doesn't know whether what the herb is and whether it helps or whether it doesn't help. Yes, you're asking the doctor to speak outside their zone of comfort and their training, so they're unable to give you an opinion. And frankly, from Triphala, which I use a lot in my practice and I'm very comfortable with, that's one of the basic reasons why integrating medicine or integrative medicine is becoming something that, most patients want, and most doctors do not understand very well because they have not spent the time in studying it. But I guess from a practical standpoint, what I want you to walk away with is that your feelings are driving your tendency to get sick. You may not be aware of your feelings because you've never allowed them. You are too busy trying to treat the symptom, which is, if I have pain, make it go away. And you're using whatever technique, whether you use Ayurveda or Chinese medicine, or you use Ayurveda with Western medicine or whatever else. Making the pain go away is not the goal. The goal is to understand why you have pain. And understanding why you have pain is for you to reflect on how it developed and how you feel. And from the other practical aspect is, when you are in pain, I would consider actually seeing the pain as a positive feedback mechanism that your body is giving you to understand yourself. So the body is so scientific that where you have pain and how the pain starts and the character of the pain will actually take you into certain emotional experiences, if you will allow yourself to go there, to allow you to actually understand for yourself how the pain is being caused. So that is on one practical level. Now, at the level of actually treating disease, I don't expect you to understand that per se completely, but understanding, feeling emotion, allowing the emotion to flow is the first step to lessen pain. Most people who come in with severe pain do not understand that they don't allow the pain. They're resisting the feeling of the pain that's causing the severity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vijaya Prata. This is a Kishan. And thank you very much sharing your knowledge, expertise, educational training, and experience of your life with us. It's very, very helpful. I know it's much more towards your scientifically and experience. It's difficult for us to understand at a practical, basic way to do it. But last slide, we appreciate it very much. Last slide was very, very helpful. This is my comments only, not a question. Even any doctors, we go to see it and we tell them we are not feeling good, we are sick, we are hurting. They won't prescribe any medication or anything until they get MRI or X-rays or something like that to poke around in our body, what's the cause of it, then they will go. With your title, gastroenterologist, I'm having a problem also, just sharing my experience with you, having ulcers and air pockets and heartburns and everything. Doctor go through the endoscopy and colonoscopy to help me out with all different kind of medications and everything. But at this age and stage, you, like you say, you come around with all the pains and disease and you know what it is. But thank you very much taking your valuable time out and helping us and sharing your experience. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I think I really wanted you, go ahead.
Yeah, Rita Kohli, she has one question too.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, you are practicing, as you mentioned, private practice too in California.
Right.
Okay. Your approach seems to be very scientific because most of the doctor I go to and most of our seniors goes to, they follow only one path, which is giving us antibiotic or medicine, which has so many side effects, and we come across more diseases than we have. One, we will create 2 or 3 more with those medicine with the regular use of them. They give us one medicine. If I ask them side effect, they will say, this is the side effects. When I go and Google them, or the prescription has a list of side effects, it gives me really long list of side effects, which they don't mention it. I have to be aware of those things. My question is, I live in New York. Do you know anybody, any doctor who can treat you with all these kind of, as you said, you believe in Ayurvedic, you believe in naturopathy, you believe in so many different kind of, way of treating a patient. Do you know anybody who can treat me or treat any of our citizens with all these prospects which you gave it to us? It's beautiful. It's wonderful that there are some doctors who are realizing there is something else than allopathy.
Yes, yes, Rita, I understand your question. I have some friends who are, I have a friend who's an acupuncturist who practices endobiogeny, similar to what I discussed. Even endobiogeny, you understand, endobiogeny that I practice is actually a scientific theory on how the body works. It is not, we use herbs and plants and all bunch of things from a Western herbalism standpoint, but we are not actually limited to just that. So everybody develops their own little approach of how to use these things. So I can forward to Dr. Rao some names of people who practice in a more endobiogenic, holistic manner in the New York, New Jersey area, so that you as a group might be able to go see them. This is definitely a huge concern for everybody. I understand. I mean, I literally have patients all over the country for this very reason. Patients see me, from Europe and from here as well, because it's not easy to find someone who uses different modalities. As you said, your doctors are trained in single things. So my point, and I could not convey it to you in the short time we had together, was that as a patient, you have to look at your disease as, believe it or not, a loving manifestation of your body to help you heal yourself. You have to first not see this as the problem. The disease is not the problem. The disease is actually there to help take you to a better level of consciousness if you should so desire it. So I know most of you have varying levels of faith in the universe, God, some kind of overseer who protects us. We didn't have, obviously, scope within today's talk to discuss that as well. But the real important thing for you to understand is that whatever is happening in your body is happening for your benefit. In other words, it's your body screaming for help in a particular part, and healing that part is not going to happen completely unless you understand the emotions. One of you mentioned earlier that you have heartburn. Well, heartburn is caused, just to give you a 1 minute snippet on that, heartburn is actually caused by a loss of shall we say, disharmony at the level of your digestive processes, where your ability to digest life has actually been interfered with. You have to understand that that part of your body may be complaining because you have not understood certain things about yourself, about maybe how, the incidents in your life that you have not been able to feel and release the emotions of, mostly some of the frustrations and anger-based emotions that you have never allowed to voice or come out. So in my practice, I spend a lot of time talking to patients about what they can do to help themselves, particularly the emotional end of things. Finding a practitioner to give you, whether it is herbs or tinctures or homeopathic medications or other alternative ways to do something is still not enough. That is still disease management. What excites me about what I just talked to you about is the fact that there is potentially ways to make things better for yourself, regardless of what else you do. So understanding yourself, what is happening to you, and understanding why it's happening to you, you don't really have to understand as much as you have to feel. See, like if your grandchild had heartburn, they would probably be crying. If your grandchild had abdominal pain or back pain, they would probably be crying. They will not move one step without the tears rolling when they're really young. Now as an adult, you have become so desensitized to your pain. You're walking around, and at any given point, you have several aches and pains in your body, and none of them are to a point where you cannot function. Do you see what I mean? You will have to learn how to stop and listen to your body and honor your body. So management requires the doctor to also understand a lot of how the human body works, but also try and empower the patient. So a lot of the time I spent with my patients is explaining this connection and saying, listen, if you are hurting, why are you not doing something about it in terms of feeling about it? I can only help you suppress the symptom, and I don't want to suppress it completely because it's a sign of a bigger problem. So let's say the doctor gives you a medication for your blood pressure, and every time you stand up, you're dizzy, or every time you go to the bathroom, you cannot urinate. Well, that's a problem. Your body is saying this medication is too strong. It's not going to work. Now, it doesn't matter what the doctor says. The reality is it's your experience. You know smart enough to stop it and say, I want an alternative. It's the same thing with every system and every symptom. So most of us, when we go to the Western medical doctor for treatment, are expecting the problem to go away. Well, I guess all that I showed you today was to tell you how little we understand the human body, how much we have it backwards, and our therapies are targeted to actually stop the symptom. And even that they don't do very well. But you don't want to stop the symptom. You want to actually lean into the symptom and actually understand for yourself, why do I have this? What can I learn from this symptom? I'm not saying that if you're having a heart attack, you shouldn't go to the hospital, because actually that is the only time when they can help you. If you're having an acute problem, like a heart attack or a stroke, or you broke a bone, or you hurt yourself with an accident, those are the situations where they can help you. Chronic conditions requires an expertise of the doctor as well, to actually not become the manager of your problem, but to actually empower you to manage and understand for yourself why you have a problem. So obviously, one session is not going to do it. I'm happy to talk about that topic of, how emotions are behind pain, and what, the body is saying about it, more a question answer session. And on another time, I can come back and do this another time where we can.
One last request. Can we have your email? Maybe sometimes
Sure.
we can get guidance. Can you post it on the screen, or where can we get it?
Oh yeah, sure. You can find it on my website, but I can send it to you. I mean, I want to discourage you from sending me emails about how can I help you in your individual situation, because that is beyond the scope. I cannot help everybody I talk to. But if you have any desire to reach out to me, I am certainly willing to,
the maximum
respond.
I will ask you, the doctor in New York.
Well, I think I'm going to send that to Dr. Rao. So probably Geeta
Okay.
can post it.
Yes.
I will send the information through that. Okay.
But
Okay.
your
So,
website,
Vijayaji,
please.
Yeah, Vijayaji, we have to empower ourselves, right? That's the main thing.
No,
Correct.
I understand, but I needed her website so that I can read it, I can see it. Your website,
Definitely.
doctor.
Got it. I understand. My website is still in development. This is something I struggle with myself. I have not put myself out there as much as I really should. So my website is still under development, but yes, you will have my contact information. And yes, empowering yourself to actually sit down and feel the pain before you take the pill. Understand this pain is coming to help me learn something about myself. And that is a perfect time to pray, to ask God for help, to say, okay, what is happening here? Please show me. How can I help myself? And believe it or not, if the tears are not rolling down your eyes in that moment when you are in such severe pain that you cannot move, it is a sign of how much you have been disconnected. And if you have children and grandchildren, if you have grandchildren who are young, watch them. That is the only way to feel. That's why childhood is the period of health for most people. Even children having bad diseases, terminal illnesses, they never suffer. Children do not suffer. The word of suffering does not enter into a child's consciousness, largely because when they are in pain, they will stop whatever they're doing and feel the pain until it passes. And once it passes, they're laughing again. They are not stuck in a place of continuously feeling, sad, because that's their consciousness. We have to all come back to that place. And to come back to that place requires us to understand ourselves. We have to start to look at ourselves. What are we doing? What is God trying to tell us? What is the universe trying to tell us? What is happening to my health today? Your health is a very important feedback mechanism for you that will actually help get you there rather than create more problems for you, because the goal is not to punish you. The goal is to educate you. Everything happening to your body is happening to educate you. So it requires
Thank you very much.
level shift in perspective.
Geetaji,
I want to ask you.
Yes, Josna.
Yeah, is Ayurvedic medicine is better than allopathic medicine? Because I have side effect more by allopathic medicine. skin problem and everything. But doctor said that we don't know about Ayurvedic medicine. And I believe.
Yeah, just Auntie, Dr. Ji is going to share her contact with me so that I can share it with you. Like you can ask her privately. What do you say, Dr. Ji?
Sure.
Just
I
one
can
you
respond.
tell. Just one sentence you tell me that is Ayurvedic medicine is better than allopathic medicine.
Well, in general, medications like Ayurveda, systems like Ayurveda and Chinese medicine treat the whole body. Western medicine treats only one specific thing. So, the problem is the nature of Western medical treatments are very strong. They shift the body very dramatically. And because of that, there is a risk of side effects. Now, when you're really sick, Western medicine helps a lot because it can shift you into a place where you can handle the symptom. And therefore, for instance, if you take, let's say, aspirin, and then if you want something stronger and you take some codeine or some narcotic medication for pain, your pain will definitely pass for a little bit, but it will come back stronger next time because the body is trying to communicate with you. So most medications that are prescribed by the average Western doctor are very, very strong. So they tend to have a higher risk of side effects, particularly if your constitutional tendency is already a little bit weak. So medications like in Ayurveda, the goal is not so much to treat the problem. The goal is to improve and work with the intelligence of the body. Just about every traditional treatment, whether it's Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, endobiology, or all of that, we are not trying to substitute and take over the functioning of your body. We're trying to support your body get better, give you gentle things so that your body can do what it has to do, which means it takes longer.
Point out one thing. Can I say one?
But I did homeopathic also. But in this country, I have to do allopathic. And allopathic is not better, just temporary relief, but doesn't go lifetime. I have to take lifetime medicine. But there is lot of side effect.
Well, yes, of course, because it's very strong. So yes, yes, it is very strong. And is Ayurveda better?
But doesn't
in other words, what I'm trying to say is you cannot compare.
Disease.
You cannot compare.
But doesn't improve my disease.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Then what should I do?
Well, again, I cannot give personal advice because each person's situation is different. Each situation.
I understand.
So you will have to understand. And what you already told us is what you have to do. You already said, Josna ji, that you cannot tolerate Western medicine. Then, you will have to forego it, because it makes common sense, right? It's kind of like, I buy a pair of shoes, no matter how expensive they are. If they don't fit on my feet or they don't sit well with my feet, I'm going to have to give them up. It is common sense,
but
right?
Insurance cover allopathic medicine. I don't care for that. Yeah. I don't care for, but more important is my body.
I mean, just like
now we're entering into the financial aspects of things, which is true. I mean, most of the things I do also insurance does not cover. My patients pay out of pocket. So, it is not, you cannot have insurance model cover. Insurance really ends up being something
but
for
more
catastrophic
important,
coverage.
my health. My health is important.
Exactly. So that's a person first you have to
I want to improve my health. I'm
that's
70
right.
up age, and I am doing about 15 years. I'm in this country, but it goes up and up. My problem. I'm doing allopathic medicine.
And that's naturally what happens.
Yeah,
that's naturally what
but
happens.
I'm not satisfied with allopathic medicine, but I have to do in this country.
No, you don't have to. You're choosing to. See, this is the other thing you have to understand. A lot of us, you see, part of becoming empowered is to recognize how much we make decisions. We make the decision because we feel we have no alternative, but you always have an alternative. The reason you are taking whatever you're taking is because you have explained it to yourself in a method that works for you in the moment. And what I'm trying to say is your body is always your best friend. And if your illnesses are increasing,
I know.
the number of medications you are taking is more, that means you are giving importance to your fear. And your fear is, I cannot come off these medicines because My doctor says if I come off of them, I will have this problem or that problem. And I'm not saying your doctor is wrong and you are right. I'm explaining for you that your choices are taking you down a certain path. And part of self-empowerment is to take responsibility for those choices and then backtrack and say, nope, I want to do something different. And if I want to do something different, I have to take responsibility for that. And I cannot see, most of us as patients want the doctor's consensus. We want, in other words, we want the doctor to agree with our choices. And that may not happen because the doctor may not have the experience, may not be willing to take that
But
risk.
doctor
And
doesn't know Ayurvedic medicine.
Correct.
Yeah,
correct,
that's
exactly.
why that is a problem. And he said that you have to take your medicine. You can't stop it. I know I can't stop it, but I have a lot of side effect, and my problem doesn't solve. So
Right.
many
And that's
years
your
I
story
did.
your story is the odd, is actually the rule, not the exception. So, okay. I guess,
Okay.
is
I'd
that,
like to say one thing. Can
My
I?
problem is not that big. It's general.
go ahead,
But
Miss,
Chan,
go ahead,
yes,
Mrs. Akka.
yes, Vijay, do you
Okay,
have time for one more question or like we can wind up?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, one more question.
Okay.
Okay.
As
Yes,
I
Chandra.
have understood, when we go to the allopathic doctor, they treat the physical pain. But from the last sentence of your lecture, you use the word soul. That shows that spirituality, divinity, and all this what should say, religious understanding is also as important as the physical and the mental pain is. When we are physically in pain, we go for the treatment, but you are
in effect,
using the word
mentally.
soul indicates that it is more to do with spirituality than the physical pain. Spirituality is at the back of the physical pain. Can I say that?
Yes, in that,
That
what I
means
was
my
trying to
soul is
convey,
in pain first, and then comes the body.
correct. That's exactly right. You have evolved into physical pain as a result of choices you made at the soul level to not experience your pain, your emotional pain. So behind every physical pain is an injury, a suppressed emotion at the soul level. That's really what I was saying. And that is absolutely right. Divinity and reliance on God, actually, not God to fix your problems, because God is not going to fix your problems. You created your problems. But God will help you feel your problems through your pain. Your body was given to help you experience life, to learn about life through the experience of life. So a lot of us have learned to experience life through a lot of programming that started in childhood. And such programming has taught us what is good, what is right, what is wrong. And it's not really what is right or wrong by God's view. It is what is right or wrong by my environment's view, what my mother believed, what my father believed, what my teachers believed, what my parents taught me, and what my early life experience taught me. And all of that has resulted in my becoming who I am today. That internal programming that is running me is causing the aging of my body. Now, in my case, it might be my joints. In someone else's case, it might be, their eyes. In somebody else's case, it might be their skin. But the reality is, where the system in the body is failing should tell us what emotions we are suppressing. So your body is like a barometer to your soul. It actually tells you the health of your soul and what is happening at the soul level. So it is very, very important that your pain is felt to the fullest possible extent. And feeling pain is something adults don't understand. A child understands. A child will never take one step in pain. They feel the pain. So feeling your pain is to be able to actually experience your pain in that moment that it triggers. And that's all you need to do. God will show you how it is all interconnected. It will actually take you back to a better state of health if you are able to feel your pain. So you're absolutely right that this is a path to spirituality also. You do not have to meditate and escape and, live in the Himalayas. Your actual choices today that brought you to this point in life, some of them were good, some of them were bad. And some of the bad ones are reflecting in your body. And they may not all be your choices. They may be the same choices your mother and your grandmother made, or your father and your grandfather made. And you are coming here as a result of the collective accumulation of injuries that have been handed down to you. So it's a very complex subject that we have to discuss at another point. But what I wanted to say is,
Yeah,
yes,
we need a
there is
change
a
in
connection.
ideology.
Yes, you have to start to realize that your physical body's suffering is going to help take you to a better
It
place of
create
spirituality if
other
you're willing.
problem. It create other problem, which I don't have.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Dr.
mentally,
Vijaya
I
Prata,
feel
I am
mental.
Neelam Puri. I want to thank you very much for your informational presentation. Being art student, I could only grasp 40% of that, but what followed was very stimulating and wonderful discussion. I would like to have a repeat of it. You are so knowledgeable. I really enjoyed and learned a lot today, early morning from you.
Thank you.
You.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
very
Thank you.
much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. I know, like,
you
we took
anyway.
extra your 15 minutes of extra time, and we loved the way you presented the whole presentation. So
And you
it
come
treats your
again.
body. That's the main thing. And every disease is suppressed emotions. That, like, we don't realize it. Like, when you said it, yeah, definitely it goes. Like, it's a suppressed emotions which converts into diseases. And the emotions bandwidth, as you said, when you are in younger age, how you show emotions, and as you age, how it gets decreased. Wonderful, Dr. Vijayaji. Definitely we would love to have you again, and I have recorded this session. I know somebody is asking in the this one, we are going to post it in the group. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.